Let me start out with the things you need to consider when you're going to start to grow cannabis. And I think probably the most important one is the environment in which you plan to work. So basically, you'll have people who have amazing greenhouses, lucky buggers, and then you get people like me who grow in my backyard, and I use what I have around my house to kind of make it work. Two sides to it. The person who grows in a controlled environment has a much easier time with a lot of things. The people who grow in the outside environment or in buckets in their house in a tent, they have a slightly different system to work with, because you'll have a changing environment. Heat going up and down, your air conditioner going on and off, all of those things play a bit of a role if you're growing inside, right? In an enclosed environment where you have control of everything, light, water, air, all of it, is a little bit easier, but also you need the environment to be able to do it. And people like me, I live in a small house. I don't want to grow in my house, so it's outside. And so that's what you kind of have to figure out first. And if you're going to be growing outside in your yard, you want to have your cannabis plants in a place where they're going to see some sunlight, right? So plotting out where you're putting them in your yard should be based on how the sun moves around your house, right? So for me, I'm very sunny in the front of my house in the morning, and then nothing in the afternoon. It's shaded. So all of mine goes in the backyard for obvious reasons. It's a bit of security as well. But I also have them on the side of my yard that gets the light as it passes around all day and doesn't get that late day sun when it's on the far side of my house. That's not as powerful as that midday heat and sun. So those kinds of things, where you're going to plant, that kind of thing, you need to take that into account first. Then you need to take into account how you want to do it. There's lots of ways to do it. First off, you'll be choosing a seed. If anybody has a question, just stick your hand up, because I'm a bit of a talker. You're going to be choosing what you grow, right? You basically have a handful of options. You have CBD, regular cannabis, which is what I think about 80% of the people I deal with grow, and then one's called autoflowers. Autoflowers are a really great seed if you're a beginner, because they're very, very forgiving. You grow them outside. It's a short growth period. It's only about 8 to 10 weeks. The plant only gets about 3 feet high. On average, you'll pull 2.5 ounces off of each plant, sometimes 3 if you're really good and you're really pushing the growth, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But ultimately, you don't have the same worries with light and dark. It can take as much sunlight as you can give them. Whereas with a regular seed, you do have to some degree. Outside, it's controlled for you, but inside, you do have to control light and dark. So all of those kinds of things you're going to take into consideration. What are you using the cannabis for? If it's for a medical reason, you're obviously going to use the CBD kind of stuff. If it's not for a medical reason, recreational, whatever you're using it for, then you have a few other choices, the autoflowers or regular seeds. Regular seeds are then broken down into sativa, indica, and hybrid. Hybrid is basically both sativa and indica. It's a sort of a level smoke, for lack of a better word, a way of using it. Indica, they jokingly call in the couch, because it's usually, the stronger it is, the less motivated you're likely to be. With sativas, I find them a little bit more motivating. I can use a sativa and go cut the grass. If you use an indica, somebody else is cutting the grass. Choosing what you're going to use, and we'll go through that as we move forward through this. So let me begin by saying that when you're planting, when you're starting your seeds out, there's a few ways to start them. And usually when you buy your seeds here, they'll give you this little sheet with it, and it basically runs you through how to germinate your seeds. What you're going to do is you're going to take basically a paper plate, and you're going to put some paper towel on it, and you're going to set your seeds on there after you've done the step with the bottled water. And you don't have to use bottled water. They recommend it here. So you'll open your seed package. You'll get a glass of water. You'll put those seeds in that water. And then for the next, say, 14 to 16 hours, you're going to leave them be. They're just going to float. And then when you're done that 14, 16 hours, if you give them a little tap on the top, they'll start to sink usually. Means they're pretty much ready. So we transfer them from that glass of water to a paper plate, some paper towel on the bottom, because that'll hold some moisture, and you need to do that. Little paper towel on the bottom, your seeds, spread apart as much as you can, because they're going to develop a taproot. And you don't want those taproots getting tangled, because when you start pulling on them, bad things start to happen. So a little thin, little paper towel over top, and then in a cool, damp, or dark place, usually a bathroom that you don't use is a great one, because they're, you know, I have one downstairs, and that's what I use because the lights are never on down there anymore. But, and you keep it a little bit moist. You're going to do that for 3 to 7 days. It depends on seeds, the quality of the seed you're using, as to how long that might take, and the environment around it. And you're going to wait till you see a little taproot. A little white root will come out of it. It'll be about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch long. And when it gets to that length, now we can put them into soil. So what you're going to do then is you're going to get a little pot. Doesn't matter what size you use. I like to start small for a bunch of reasons. So I like to use these pots because they're literally self-containing. You do not have to pull the plant out or do any of the fiddling with the roots, which if you don't know what you're doing can set you back. So these are fantastic in that you're going to be able to put the seed in there, and when it reaches that point where we're moving it to sort of its forever pot, we can just put some little snips in it, we bury the whole thing, and the plant will just push right through it, and this will slowly biodegrade into your soil, which is good for your soil, by the way. So you'll take your little pot, you're going to have your soil, which I have some of right here, and we will fill it up just to that line, right? There's a line inside the pot. You can give it a little shake. A little bit of if you're using soil that has a lot of wood chips, the bigger ones, maybe fish them out. Just take your finger, and down to your first knuckle on your little finger, you're just going to push it right there, and it'll make a little divot. You're going to drop your seed in, take a little soil, cover it up there, and now that seed, you get a little water. I like to use a spray rather than dumping water on them, because that's like me dumping water on you. It's a bit of a shock, but if I use a little bit of spray, I can get that water into there. I can moisten up that soil without really hammering away at that seed, because it's brand new, and we need to take some care of it. So in that pot, you're probably looking at it sitting there from anywhere to, say, up to 3 weeks. It really does depend on the environment you're growing in. When I do mine in my house, 3 to 4 weeks, I start to see a really decent little size, right? And if you want to do them outside, right now is a really good time in the next couple of weeks to start. Some people have already started, and that's fantastic too. So once this gets to, say, about 3-4 inches high, you could probably move it outside. That's weather dependent, right? So what you're going to do is, what I usually do is I usually will take this pot. I won't use the small one. I'll use this so that I can keep it inside my house for a little longer. I like it to get to about yay height before I move mine outside. So say a foot or so, and they'll be very spindly at first. You'll notice you'll usually get two leaves, you know, that kind of thing. You may have to add something into the pot to act as a bit of a support for them, especially when they're young. As they grow, those stalks on some of them will get immense, where when you try to pull them out later on, it's going to be a challenge. So that's the getting it into a pot process. When you first put the seed in the pot, like that little pot, that first few weeks, everything that seed needs to be successful is in that soil, water, and in the seed itself. It does not need your help. And what I find with a lot of new growers is they're excited to get going, and that's great. But then they start feeding way too soon. And what you'll end up with a small plant anyway is called nutrient burn. And you'll end up with the outside of your leaves will start to turn yellow and brown. And for cannabis, most of the photosynthesis or the feeding that's done with the sun is done on the edges of those leaves. So once they start to yellow and burn like that, now your plant is struggling, right? The more they yellow and burn, so if you kept going, dumping chemical in after chemical, eventually you just kill it. And there really isn't a way to undo it once it starts. You can, but you need to be on site, eyes on, and you need to know what you're doing. And that's not always easy. So the best thing to do is to just leave them be till you get them outside, basically. Inside the house, they're pretty safe. You can control that environment pretty well if that's where you're doing yours, or a greenhouse, and let them be. Once you get them outside and they're that foot tall and we're going to move them into a forever pot, then we should start talking about how we feed them. And for feeding your plants, pretty simple. We have 2 different systems that I sell here, this one that's called Hog, and this one's Innovative Plant Products. There are literally, if you go online, hundreds of them. And they do various things. Some are better than others. I've been lucky enough to try many of them. I've personally found these two to be the best, and this is the one I personally like to use. And I've been growing for a lot of years now. And this one I find works really well, and it's very easy. It's great if you're a first-time grower. So what you'll do is online, you can find these, but I also have them in the store as well. You'll find, like for this one, it'll give you a feed chart. So basically what that does is it shows you that here in your plant, you're in your vegetative stage. So this stage where the plant is quite small, it's not really, it hasn't started to flower or show flower yet. And that can be 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes a little longer. Our weather lately has been super wonky. And from being in and out of the store last year, there was sort of a, I don't want to say 50-50 because that's probably not right, but there was a lot of varying degrees of success. Some people came in with stories of like plants that were 18 foot tall, and some people came in with pictures of plants that weren't doing anything. And that just seemed to be, to some degree, where you were in Kamloops, what your elevation was, and where your house sits in relation to the sun, because we had such a weird opening to the season last year. Lots of rain, weather changes, and all of those things play into how well your plant's going to do. So if you get 3 weeks into your vegetative stage and you're still not seeing like flower, and I'll explain what that'll look like, don't panic if the weather's kind of all over the map like it's been lately, because that will play a role in the success you see, right? When you get in that super hot weather, you'll start to see your plants really start to accelerate, right? So this is the feed chart, and it's done in milliliters to liters. So I tell people the easiest way to use is one of those 4-liter milk jugs. Super simple system for feeding if you don't want to spend a lot of money on fancy measuring equipment. And it'll tell you, so in your first week, if you're using a rooted clone, which is one you bought that's already a pre-ready plant, you would be 0.3 of a milliliter to a liter. So if you're using a 4-liter jug, every number on here is times 4 to get to that 4-liter mix, right? So you'll do that through the vegetative stage, and then it'll give you numbers through what's called the flowering stage. How do I know when my plant's flowering? You'll start to see things change on the plant, and there are things you want to watch for. So when the plant gets to about a foot tall, you're going to start to see where the leaves join the stem. There should be little white pistils almost that come out, like little tiny, almost look like spikes. If you see those, you got a female plant. Female plants are what you want. If you don't have a female plant and you have a male and you're growing for consumption, not for seed, you need to get rid of that male. Get it the heck out of there, because it will hermaphrodite your other plants, and they'll change their sex. And you'll end up with a whole pile of male plants and no cannabis at all, and everybody will be standing around going, what happened? So that's an important thing to know. You'll see these little pistils start to form. Now you're starting to get into the flowering stage of the plant, and that's where you'll start to see, those little tight tufts start to form, which is the beginning of those buds and stuff. That's the point where now I have to start feeding the plant, right? So we're feeding it in that flowering stage. So it'll give you 8 weeks, and it can be extended depending on, last year I think I went 11 and a half weeks. So when you get to this end one, you're basically really just feeding it and flushing it. So if you get to the end, like this last 7 week, and where you are here, and you want to go extra weeks, you will use the number in the 7-week part. The number at the 8 week is for the very end, where you're going to actually wash out your cannabis. What that basically is just dumping clean water on it for at least 14 days. The plant itself will flush the chemical out. If you don't do that, it will have a very metallic-y taste when you smoke it, and it's not very good for you. So when you go to feed your plants, you've got these 2 systems, right? This is the one, is a 3-part system, and like I showed you on here, it's just a matter of numbers. They work together. I get people coming in all the time saying, oh, I'm flowering, so I'm just going to grab this one, see ya. It's not how they work. It will work, but it won't work optimally. Ultimately, you're mixing them all. So when you mix them all, it's in the order that it's on the chart. So I would put my grow into my 4-liter container, then my micro, then my bloom, then my water. And the water acts as a mixing agent for you as you put it in to get that really mixed up good. If you don't, if you, let's say for example, you fed your plants and then you've got like a little bit left in the bottom, and so instead of remixing, I just dump that on. The risk you run is, if you haven't mixed it properly, is that that little bit at the bottom has 60% of what you put in it, and now you're going to burn your plants, right? So taking the time to mix that water and then delivering it as quickly as you can. Don't let it sit and settle, because these are heavier than water. So they will sink to the bottom, and then one plant will get an enormous dose, and the water coming off the top won't have the same sort of oomph in it. So make sure it's mixed. I like to shake it as well and just get it really good, and then you can just put it in around your plants. This one is the same sort of system, but 4-part. So you have 2 parts you use for the vegetative stage and 2 parts for bloom, and then a whole bunch of like add-on chemicals. Some people swear by them and love using them, and some people don't bother at all. And I'm in the latter. I don't bother at all with any of the add-on stuff. I strictly use these. I'm not really a big fan of making it, but if you're one of the ones who wants to, the same thing counts on both charts. Either way, if you're using hog and you want to add the extras, you can. And if you're using the other one, you can add the extras as well. What they do is they'll increase mass, bud density, bud size, those kinds of things, but very time consuming to do. And obviously, you're going to spend a good portion of the morning measuring out what you're doing, whereas this one is a much easier system to use, particularly if you're brand new at this, right? So once we've got that part done, let's talk about the soils you're going to use. I advise people to prep if you have an area in your yard, if you grow outside, if you're growing inside, once you've used your soil, it's garbage. Unless you've got some way to rejuvenate it, it's junk. So I just would throw it out if you're growing inside. Outside is a different area. I have a set area I grow in. So what I do is every year, once I've grown, I yank out all the root systems and stuff, and then I dig it out and I rejuvenate it over the winter. So what I'll do is I use Berger. I'll add a couple of things of that. I will add some manures to it, and I'll mix that all into the spot I use. And I sometimes will throw in things like worm castings, which is these that help break down microbes in soil. And then I'll leave it all winter. And then over the course of the winter and fall and that kind of thing, it rejuvenates itself. And by spring, I can replant there. I've got good, healthy soil. If I don't do that, I'm just planting into the soil that the cannabis plants the year before have already sucked everything they can get out of. Cannabis is a leech. It takes everything it can get out of the soil. So if you don't rejuvenate and grow in bad soil, you'll get that same kind of, you'll get a crappy result. Either undersized plants or plants that flower and then suddenly stall out, and those are frustrating. So it's super important to put in that work in the start if you're growing outside in a specific spot, to make sure that you've got that ground ready to go, so you're not wasting your time, basically. Any of these will do the trick. They're all very well aerated. I like this one because it has not as much perlite in it. It uses a little more wood chip, which is much more natural, much more biodegradable from my point of view. So I like the Berger. ProMix is super popular with the professional growers as well. So that's good. And some people have started growing in sea soil because it's so rich. I've tried it and I've had limited success with it. What I always say to people is if you want to use the sea soil, and it's probably one of the best growing soils on the market in terms of what's in it, how rich it is, how good it is, I would take 2 of these and I would mix it with this in a wheelbarrow or whatever you guys use, a bucket or whatever you use, and then use that if you want to use this soil with it as an add-on. I like to look at it more like the worm castings. It's more of an add-on. For this point where you're starting your process, pick a really good seed starter soil. This is not a seed starter soil. This is a soil for after that process. Art Knapp sells, this bag is I think 14 bucks, something like that. Excellent stuff. They bring it up from the coast. It's a company that actually makes seed starter soil. I've always found I have a lot of success if I start in this and then I move to a more outdoor, I'll call it an outdoor soil for lack of a better way of putting it. This one, great for starting. So this is what I would start with. And then when I move this into a larger pot or into the ground, this is the soil I would use at that point. I think for people who are new, I kind of hammer away at this when people come into the store to talk to me. Worry less about what your yield is going to be in the first couple of years and worry more about your process. And by that, I mean how you go about growing your cannabis, from decision about seed to I'm rolling it in paper and smoking it. What is that process for you? And it's different for everybody. I have guys who come into the store whose process is so refined, it's unbelievable. Like they're talking about introducing things in milliliters and, you know, like the guys who spend the day measuring out what they're going to do, right? I'm not one of those people. I'm a little more hit and miss-ish, but I think the process is important. So I have, for me, a written out process that I use that I've been successful with in my space, right? And that's going to be a different process for everybody, a different way of doing it, how you like doing it, those kinds of things, right? So that's what I would do. I would suggest in the first year, you know, get a little pad or something. Some of the guys who come in here have books where they've kept notes for years, and it's just incredible, right? You could literally map out Canada's weather by their notes. That's what I would suggest, is writing it down so you know what you did, when you did it, how much you gave, you know, and then over time, you personally will refine that process by natural osmosis into something that works for you in the space you're in. Water from the bottom. Always water from the bottom. If you water from the top, what you run the risk of with cannabis is powdery mildew, which is absolutely deadly. Because if you are somebody who's doing an organic grow, and a lot of people do, we have organic stuff you can use here. You don't get the same yields and results with an organic grow, but you also don't have to introduce any chemical. The shitty thing about that is if you water from the top all the time and you get that powdery mildew, you're going to have to introduce a chemical. And that's going to change the process for you right there and then, which is terrible. There's lots of things online you'll read where they'll tell you, oh, mix water and milk. Most of the guys who grow will tell you powdery mildew is the kiss of death. It's very tough to get rid of. Once it gets on one plant, it's very quickly transferred to other plants. So if your plants are close together, like in a small box, it can very quickly cause you all kinds of issues, and it's a very difficult problem to solve. There's a few ways to avoid root rot. Root rot usually has to do with either with way too much moisture, or you've planted in an area where you have a lot of decomposing matter. So for example, my neighbor cut down a tree a couple of years ago, but planted his cannabis right next to where he'd cut it down. Well, the tree rotting created so much moisture, so many microbes in that soil that his cannabis just did not do well, right? So I would try to avoid that. Pests, they're a problem in Kamloops. Most people will tell you if they've grown cannabis for any length of time, they've had at least 1 year where they spent the whole summer fighting with the little buggers. I have. I think the way I use to do it is I tend to strip leaves. I think when you have your plant gets big, especially when it gets big, and you've got a lot of those really big fan leaves and they look really cool and people come into your yard and go, wow, look how great your cannabis is doing. If you're not going to use those leaves for like poultices or medications or those kinds of things, which some people do, stripping them away periodically allows light and air to pass through, and that will keep some of the insects out. Overwatering, putting them in a really shady spot where, you know, it's nice and cool, allowing water to pool around your plants, any of those kinds of things will attract bugs. Like, so if you have a pond, don't put them next to a pond, right? Because there's already bugs there and they'll just move right in there because it's free food. So those kinds of things, that's a great comment, because those kinds of things can, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks into your grow and suddenly you're dealing with like pests. That's a real pain. If you top your plant, it's going to grow out this way more than it's going to grow this way. I don't top my plants, but lots of people do. I mean, there's no right or wrong to it. That's one of those things where I would fall back on, if that's your process and that's how you grow, great. I don't bother with it. I've done it and I don't see a huge difference personally in what I yield or really the shape of the plant, and there's some advantages to it because your plant will get lower down and wider, so you tend to have a little more air there, a little more sunlight getting into those center. Like if you've ever harvested cannabis, if you have a really, really large plant, you got those fantastic colas and buds on the outside that make you just drool. And then the closer you get into the inside of the plant are these tiny little weak ones because they didn't get light, and you know, those kinds of things. The other thing about stripping some fan leaves off if you're not using them is if you're feeding your plant with stuff you're buying, you're paying to feed leaves you have no use for. So taking some off is also a way of sort of allowing that plant to distribute its food, its energy where you want it, which is in the buds. That said, Kamloops is very hot in the summer. If you strip away all those leaves, that will not be good. What you have to try to do is do it judiciously. So plants are like people. If I walk up and yank your finger off, you go into shock. If I do that with a plant, it does the exact same thing. It's a living being. So it will go into shock. So what you want to do when you strip your leaves is you want to strip them, but you want to strip them in a manner that allows you to, and this is one of those types where you might do some top watering. So what I do is I take a pair of snips and I'll snip mine off so that the cut I make is facing up. So what I'll do then is grab my hose when I'm done with it and shoot it over top of the plant, and little bits of water will sit on top of that cut until it seals, and that way I don't let anything else in. Pathogens, those kinds of things that might be in the air, insects that might lay eggs in it or cause any number of problems. So that's important. The other important thing is you don't want to be continually putting your plant into shock, right? So stripping leaves continually, like every day I go out and I strip 40. My plant's in constant shock. So if you decide you want to strip your leaves, you're going to pick a day you want to do it and you strip it. And then you don't strip any again for at least 2-3 weeks. Let the plant recover before you go working back on it again. The ladies here, when they're dealing with plants inside or outside, sometimes those plants will sit on a cart for a week, maybe 2, while they work on fixing that plant up, and then they'll bring it back, and it's great, right? But they allow a certain amount of time for the plant to recover from what they're doing to it before they're doing anything else to it, and cannabis is the same. So I would strip some leaves in Kamloops. The air going through the plant and sunlight getting into that inside is good, but don't strip them all. I would say keep it to maybe 30-40% over the life of the plant. And it's those really, really big ones that block light is what you really want out of there to get the sun in on your plant. But so that, yeah, and that will help you also with keeping insects out of there, because if it's hot and the sunlight's there, they're going to look for shade. So the less you provide them, the less likely they are to jump into your plants. The Seeds Art nap cells are all feminized. We don't have male seeds. If you're bringing in seeds that a good-natured friend gives you, knowing whether they're feminized or not is important. And if they tell you they don't know, I don't recommend that you use them if you plan to plant them, like in this gentleman said, in a row type of thing. You would want to separate them until you were sure what you had, which makes it more complicated. It's just so much easier if you buy professional seeds. There's actually guys in Kamloops who, not companies, guys, who do their own seed production. They're that into it. And some of them, I've been lucky enough to get some of their seeds, and it's incredible what some of the local guys are doing right now. The product is as good as anything you're going to buy from the government store. That's just a fact. One of the bonuses of my job is people grow and then they come in and they give me some and say, what do you think? It's one of the great advantages of my job, right? So I get to try a lot of people's cannabis, and I got to admit, last year some of the stuff I tried was just incredible. Like people in Kamloops are getting very good at it, considering we have a great environment for it, right? So, the other thing I should mention is if you're somebody who lives in Paul Lake or Pinatan or one of those higher elevation places, your start times change, right? Everything changes. How much time you have changes. They have to be much more time conscious about their plants when they get them outside, because they don't have the same window somebody who lives in Brocklehurst like me has. So if you're doing it inside, what you're going to end up having to do is you're going to have to provide light, and not just that kind of light. You're probably going to need a light bar that does the growing. This is a small one I just picked up for the purpose of showing it. They come in 48-inch lengths. This is what I use. I actually start my plants in my laundry room, believe it or not, and I hang it from a curtain rod, and then my pots are underneath it, and I've got it on 2 wires, and as the plants grow, I just pull the wires, and the light moves up. If you're doing auto flowers, as that lady mentioned, you could leave the light on all day if you wanted. If you're not doing auto flowers, they do need some light and some dark. So 12 and 12 is ideal, but if you're growing outside, you're never going to get that. So, you know, as close as you can come to it without it becoming your life is probably good. We also carry them in a bunch of different strengths in just a straight light bulb. So it will screw right into whatever is existing. If you have a portable desk lamp, it'll work in it. So and they're a little bit cheaper than this route, so it gives you kind of 2 options there. The other thing is, if you've ever been interested in growing in a tent inside, they told me that these ones are 70% off today, so they're pretty cheap. I didn't pay that for mine. And other than that, guys, if you have questions along your grows, I work Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Always in the store, always happy to talk cannabis with people. If you are going to come in, please bring pictures of what you're doing, because it's so much easier for me to give you better advice if I can actually see where you're at, see your plants. If you're coming in because you have questions about something that's going on inside your plants, close-up pictures of what you're at, what your problem is, are super helpful. There are so many people here. I mean, they put on the notice our cannabis expert, Chuck. I'm no expert. I'm a person just like the rest of you guys who started growing and over time developed my process. And part of my process, to be quite frank with you, belongs to customers who've come into this place. I get customers coming in all the time and they'll say things to me. I'll be like, what? There was a guy last year who told me he uses molasses. I'd never heard of this. Never heard of this. Then he brought his cannabis in. Holy man. Right away, I'm quizzing him about how does this work? How does this work? Right? People who want to change like the flavors of their cannabis can do that with a lot of different things. There's a guy who comes into the store all the time. At the end of the year, he goes out and he buys 6 2-liter bottles of Dr. Pepper and he dumps them in the ground. And that's how, and he swears up and down his cannabis tastes like Dr. Pepper. It's a fun thing to grow. I think, like I said, if you're not focused on, oh my God, I got to get pounds of pot, and more focused on developing your skills as a grower, over time, your yield will get ridiculous. I grew 4 plants in the ground last year and took almost 6 pounds off them. So once you develop, and I'm not by any chance the top end of that. There were guys coming into the store who were giving me numbers that were just earth-shattering. Well, that's pretty much it for today then, guys. They'll let you know when the fall one is for trimming and all that kind of stuff. Again, if you have any questions, concerns about, you can call the store or you're more than welcome to come in. I'm always happy to talk cannabis with people. So if you want to come in and see me, you want to come in and just show me what you're doing, I'm thrilled. There's nothing, I learn more from our customers than I do from working here. That's the honest truth. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate your time.